This is the Harmonic Motion podcast, a place where you, dear listener, can join with automotive aftermarket professionals as they delve into and discuss the matters which matter.
Welcome to this episode of the Harmonic Motion podcast. I'm your host, James Dillon, and on this episode we're going to talk about apprentices, apprenticeships, colleges, garage employers, culture, and a whole heap more. Joining me in this episode are two giants of the automotive aftermarket, Tom Denton and Andy Crook. Welcome, Tom and Andy, to this conversation today on Apprentices on the Harmonic Motion podcast. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Good to be here, James. Thanks for inviting me.
The conversation today we're going to have about apprentices. It's a very interesting subject, particularly bearing in mind the technician crisis. So the only way to fill the technician crisis, I guess, is to take a technician from somewhere else or to train a young person and maybe mold them into the technician that you need for your business. So that process, I'm sure you guys, like myself, I'm a product of the apprenticeship program. I've got some fond memories of that, and undoubtedly it was foundational in my development as a young tech. But it's not all smooth sailing all of the time, and I think there are probably some things that a garage maybe looking for a technician or apprentice, or maybe an apprentice themselves, should be aware of. And it seems to be, I don't know, for me as a young person coming out of school, the options that you've got are probably pretty widespread, and how and why you might choose the motor industry as an apprenticeship. And I suppose one of the things I thought about when we were coming up with the subject matter really is the biggest issues really with apprenticeship or the motor trade being suggested by schools and or career services to young people that the motor trade is a good place to go and have a career. What do you think is an issue? Why, or how is that being phrased? And maybe why? I think if you did a benchmark, if you did an examination of the quality of young people coming into the industry, if you did a straw poll of colleges, there are some really good students and young apprentices coming in, but I think the colleges, my feedback is they're not seeing necessarily students with A grades in some of the core subjects coming into the motor industry. What could we do as an industry to help facilitate the conversations with schools and careers advisors, do you think?
Well, shall I kick off with a few general ideas? I mean, I think we are trying to do things, through the IMI and through other organisations. I think we're trying to work more with schools and provide schools with more information about our trade and things like that. But we still, for some reason, still suffer with what we often call the Coronation Street mechanic, don't we? Whenever we see somebody on the TV, there's a big piece of grease down their face and dirty overalls and things like that. And I don't know if I just read things into that, but that feels to have been like that for a long time. So I think that there's a lot more we can do to get out to schools and to teach the teachers, if you like. I mean, I see some colleges around the country. I was visiting one in Lincoln the other day with Andy, as it happens. And, I look what some of the colleges are doing and the links that they're making with schools and having the schools come into the colleges and have a look and see what amazing equipment they've got and how this really is a fascinating trade. I mean, I love it. I've been in it my entire life and I absolutely love it. And it's getting that enthusiasm over. And it's starting to happen, I think, but there's much more work to be done.
Yes. One of the questions I often have when we think about that, Andy, I don't know what your perspective is on helping people that don't know about the trade to know about the trade. Is it about outreach?
Yeah, it's absolutely about outreach. The if you like, the actors that can change the perception the most are the garages themselves, because all of the people who have children who could be entering the trade probably have a vehicle, have probably visited a garage, and that's their only point of contact, their only experience of a garage. If that's negative, then they're probably not going to encourage children towards that trade. If it's a positive experience, then they probably think, oh, this isn't a bad career for my children. So it starts with the garage. And I think you'll hear me say this throughout this conversation. It's no good pointing our fingers at everyone else, because every time you make a point, there are 4 fingers or 3 fingers pointing back at you. So the problem with the trade is just systemic within the trade. So I think the garages that are doing well in their local communities will not suffer a technician or an apprentice shortage, because they'll have links with the right people to get the right people in. The garages that operate in isolation will struggle, and that's the key message. You have to be part of your community, and you will only get big fish if you fish in the right pond.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. It is a good point.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, it's I read lots of comments on social media and things like that around this sort of subject, and the number of comments that are effectively saying somebody should do something, rather than thinking, what can we do about it, and things like that. And I have a phrase, I've used it for years. I'm about to get it into every podcast I'm on if I can. But if you walk around looking like an oily rag, you'll be treated and paid like an oily rag, and you just watch the local businesses that have lifted up the level of the trade. They've got nice uniforms on, the workshop's clean, the tools are put away properly and things like that. And it's a different world altogether when you see these sort of places compared to the ones who are just covered in grease and dirt all the time. It doesn't have to be a rolling around in grease and dirt job. We really need to get rid of that. So I couldn't agree more with what Andy was saying about the local industry stepping up. I mean, I've been trying to do it in my own little way and in my own little businesses all my life. And it's, it's a challenge, but it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, so we don't need a milk marketing board for the motor industry, so to speak, and it's not really one or other organisation. It's everybody's mission to portray the professionalism. So the outward view and vision, the premises that we operate from, the way that we behave, the professionalism that we exhibit to our own customers is our own best tool in persuading others to join.
Absolutely, and the link with the careers people and the colleges and the schools is often cited as a reason why the trade attracts, shall we say, underperforming academics, but it doesn't. Recently as a lecturer, one of my cohorts that we actively went to schools and recruited were top performing academically, 50% of which went on to a degree. So as an end outcome, I was aiming to get more and more automotive students onto higher education. So the perception or the links are there. They can be fixed if they're broken in a region or an area. They can be fixed. It can be done. It's been proven, and I've seen it with my own eyes. So, and if anyone wants evidence of that, if there's someone listening from, I can signpost them to the college and to the universities involved. It can be done. So it doesn't have to be how it's initially perceived. It would be the other point. That often cited problem doesn't exist everywhere.
No. I suppose if you're leaving it to chance, if you're not proactively recruiting or thinking about that long term, your only mechanism is to get the schools or the careers guidance to suggest somebody, you're doing something wrong. That's almost the last thing in the process. There should be much more ahead of that is positively encouraging you not to have to rely on that. That's what we're saying.
Absolutely.
And I think it's all
about being proactive, I think.
Yeah, and I agree, Andy. And taking the same idea a little step further, I think sort of employers could do more to be able to say what it is that they need and what it is that they want, rather than just saying, I need somebody to come and be an apprentice. Well, sell yourself a little bit more. Sell the great facilities that you've got. Sell how you look after your staff, sell the training that they're going to do, sell what's interesting about the trade. It's not just about salaries. I mean, there have been, several genuine surveys about, what would attract you into the trade, and the salary that you get is about second on the list. It's important. We all need to get paid, but it's not about just selling that. It's about selling yourself. We do interesting work. We do this sort of thing. We're moving in this direction. We've got this new equipment. When we get some more new equipment, we'll get people to train you on it and things like that. And it's like, I'd think, even now, that sounds like a good job. I might go and apply for that one. If you sell it properly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't apply for it, by the way, because I don't want to anymore, but
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. Do you think then, chaps, that the career pathway is well defined? So where a garage is thinking about service and maintenance, is there a career pathway to sell an aspiring student, maybe that is highly achieving academically, that's looking for a pathway? Is that signposted well? Do we have a common statement that we all know that this is generally the route? Do we sell the destination, that there are steps along the way?
No. Is the short answer to that, because I would say the reason we don't have that well signposted route is because it isn't a path well trodden. If I'm honest, because the majority of people who in the past that have entered the trade as an apprentice from school and have got to the position now of being if you like, the business leader within their business through a process of just basically time, and has ended up in a business, and then is looking to recruit, and they want to recruit effectively someone. Their experience of it is exactly they just look for someone who's done what they've done, and if you look at the percentage of school leavers who go on to do higher education, it's quite large, and therefore that route appears to someone who wants to join the automotive trade blocked, because if they go to college or they leave school and become an apprentice, the path finishes at level 3, or that's how it appears. Now, I'm pretty sure the three of us are living proof that it isn't. However, it isn't well signposted, and I think that is something that we're in the process of changing as an industry, and as both academic providers as well as business are recognizing, and something that I've championed, and it's something I'll probably speak about more during the conversation, is, do we want a school leaver as our apprentice, or do we want a college leaver as our apprentice? And do we want a higher apprentice, or do we want a traditional apprentice? Because they're now two routes that are available. So, and they would probably end up in two slightly different jobs to the ones that were available to me when I left school.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, Andy.
Sorry, James, to talk over you. I think there's another aspect to the question you asked about career structure. I agree with Andy's points, but one of the things within our trade is it's unbelievably varied in the type of places that you can go to work. So you can go to work in the Maserati dealership or something, which, there's 10 technicians, 2 people working in the stores, front of house support, whole management structure and all this sort of thing. Or you can go and work for the guy that has a little workshop somewhere, a little garage, and it's only, him or her and you. It can be very small. So it's looking at different types of career structure. If you work in a big main dealer of some sort, you could perhaps see that, well, okay, I'll be a technician for a while. I'll work my way through the technician hierarchy. technology, and top end of diagnostics, electronics, or whatever it is that is of interest. And then you can sort of see opportunities for moving into management possibly, or technical training and different things like that. Whereas it's perhaps harder to see. And sometimes I think when people look at the trade, they perceive it as being the little garage rather than the bigger opportunities. I mean, I've been in sort of many different areas of the trade throughout my different career, and I've sort of moved around as I've done it, but it's a difficult one to get over when it's so varied, I think. It's another area where we've got a bit more work to do, I think. But, just to go back to what we started saying, when people are trying to recruit somebody into the garage or into that as an apprentice, then at that point, they need to be able to tell the person, well, look, these will be your opportunities in the future. I mean, yes, you will have to do some basic work to start with until you build up into different things. But it's, there are great opportunities to move on. I never thought I'd end up where I am. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but I'm happy with it. But I've always found that there's been a massive, career structure throughout the automotive trade. I've, never really done anything else.
There's immense role diversification, isn't there? But they all start effectively with the same fundamentals, probably what is still taught at level 1. If you've got those fundamentals, those building blocks, you can go anywhere you want within the automotive career. I mean, I put in the chat, how many roles are there, recognized roles, are there in the automotive industry? There's got to be, a good number. I wouldn't like to put a number on it off the top of my head. It's the IMI probably have that number, Tom, but and they all start effectively, don't they, with that, that day one, turning up at the garage and learning how to make the tea.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, it's true. If you look at, for me, when we were thinking about this as a concept for where technicians and trainees might go, if you look at really the allied services that support the fixing and repairing of car, you can go in either direction. You could go equipment manufacturer, lifts and ramps, and workshop environments. You can go the other way and go tools, software engineering, development. There's even just on the narrow focus of the electronics in cars, there's such a diverse array of jobs that can exist that would benefit hugely from having the core functional skills and knowledge and understanding of repairing the car. But it's that where does that exist? Where does the landscape where we could pop that chart on the wall and point, this is the destination that you could end up to? And I think that's sometimes maybe what's missing when we're talking to young people about the diversity. And I agree with Tom. I never thought I'd end up here when I was, under the back of a lorry fixing it. I had no idea really. And by sort of virtue of good luck and fortune, I didn't realize that this existed and we could end up where we could end up. And I think that having that sort of signposting about the growth opportunities would be really beneficial.
I think just to add to that, James, as well, is that, sometimes people want to join a certain type of trade and they're not necessarily interested in a career structure. And I think it's important to stress that that's okay as well. You've still got to do a good apprenticeship or a good training or whatever. But if you then want to just be a good technician, working throughout the week on, straightforward jobs and doing what you want, that's okay. There are roles at different levels. I mean, that for me, that wouldn't be where I want it to be. I've always liked the challenges that other people couldn't fix and different things like that. That's what motivated me. But we are all different as well. So just wanted to stress that, if anybody's listening who thinks I don't want a complicated career path, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a point well made, Tom, that there are lots of, career technicians who make a very good living, who have a very nice life, that are very comfortable in the work and the job they do, and feel stretched and challenged day in by the diversity of the work. Because often when we look at the car as a system, even when you think about the different, attributes, plumbing, heating, electricity, mechanical motion, there are lots of aspects within the core function of a car car that is probably enough to stretch even the most intrigued and expectant mind. So I would agree 100%. There's a lot that the core job has to offer. Yeah, that's really good. So that's really interesting. So I think we've all got to do our bit to show the interested the light. I'm really interested, Andy, in your discussion about maybe that higher level recruitment. So if you've got different needs within the business, I think some of that comes down to a little bit of business needs analysis, and where some garages may be working day to day on the gap I've got today. The apprenticeship program obviously is at least a 3-year cycle from inception to a new recruit to their blossoming as, in inverted commas, qualified. I often wonder, and I don't know your view, Andy, about how many garages would have that 3 or 5 year plan that they're resourcing or gearing up to be resource ready for when they reach that part of their business plan.
Some is the answer, but many won't have. Something I talk about quite a lot is having a succession plan, and something called linchpin redundancy. If your best technician left tomorrow, how would you be in terms of how far up in the muck would you be if the worst happened, he came in and handed in his notice, and you have no succession plan? And it doesn't matter about the size of the business when we start to talk about linchpin redundancy, because if that individual, and it doesn't matter which role they do in the trade within the business, it is so dependent on, without a succession plan, then you're in real trouble. And one of the things I thought about when I was looking at the questions is I was actually thinking every role in the garage, every position requires an apprentice. Because there are so many benefits to having someone that linchpin person, whatever role that is. Let's just use the technician because it's a convenient example. If he's your number one tech, and you're totally reliant upon him, the information transfer, the IP that person holds, will disappear with him if you haven't got anyone for that person to mentor and coach. If he's mentoring, coaching someone, or she's mentoring and coaching someone, that IP is being transferred and it is being disseminated through the business, and that is absolutely vital. So that what you end up with, if you do have a succession plan and you do have apprentices in the key roles at all times. Now, all of them will make it, but if you've always got one, what will be happening is you will be in far better position should someone decide to leave the business. That apprentice, as you say, might be in that cycle. And I'm not suggesting for a second that when the apprentice finishes his 3-year apprenticeship that he will become the linchpin, but he will have absorbed a great deal of the knowledge from that linchpin, and hopefully the apprentice that started a couple of years ahead of the new apprentice may be already in a position to be taken on that role. And therefore you're never faced with the situation whereby you're in that kind of position whereby you're actually worried that one day one of your members of staff is going to come in and hand in their notice, because you already know there's a capable person, if you like, in their shadow. And that person, that linchpin person, is developing their own skills, is going to work and is coaching, is helping, is passing on their knowledge. And I don't know many people who don't enjoy that, especially in a very informal environment, such as being a technician and a mentor to an apprentice. It's an incredibly rewarding role. But you remember that feedback is 360, because that apprentice will be a younger person, possibly. It could be a slightly older person, but they could be feeding back to you what they like and dislike about working in your business, and it gives you a chance to improve it. So I can't see any negatives from doing this and having an apprentice, and why if you're out there as a garage deciding, sitting on the fence thinking, should I have one or shouldn't I have one? Just this one thing, linchpin redundancy and sharing IP and giving that person a coaching and mentoring role, are already enough benefits to take one on, in my opinion. And it's certainly something I've done within my business, and it's been very, very successful.
I just wanted to add sort of a little bit on top of what was Andy was saying. As always, I fully agree. But as well as sort of passing on the skills, as Andy was suggesting in the mentoring and things like that, the word ethics jumped into my mind as well. Not Essex, where I live, but ethics. And of course, you're training this person, you're helping this person, understand the ethics of how you run your particular business. And there's a huge advantage to that, I think, as to compare to, going shopping, if you like, and buying a new technician or something like that, is that this person is already in the culture of how you run your business, how you treat your customers and things like that. So it was just to add that little bit on top of what Andy was saying, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I've got a couple of questions that sort of sprung from that. One is about then the selection. Often we think about selecting a young person for a position within your business as a function on a functional level. I have a gap for a ... I'm looking for a person as an apprentice to be a ... But where does the interpersonal, the morals, the cultural alignment come into that selection process? Because again, as much as the functional skills are absolutely critical, is there enough, I suppose, focus put on that you're culturally that apprentice could be the right fit for your business, bearing in mind that you're going to integrate them and have them as your sort of linchpin redundancy? Is that often overlooked?
I mean, I'd agree. Yes, I think it is, and it's a very difficult thing to judge, though, isn't it? If you're kind of meeting somebody on the first case, but it's perhaps something that should be built into the process of getting to know, a potential apprentice. I nearly used the word interview, and then I managed to stop myself then because I don't like the word interview at all. Invite potential apprentices to come and spend a day or two with you at your garage, including having fish and chips at the end of the day, and that's all part of you sort of showing them your culture and them seeing whether they're the fit as well, because they might be thinking, no, this is not the right garage for me, and therefore we need to go somewhere else. So I think we could certainly improve the way we learn about each other, as in, as employers learning about our potential apprentices, and never to forget that the apprentice should be learning whether we're the right person for them as well. We mustn't go there thinking how high and mighty we are giving this person a new career. It's a partnership, I think.
Yeah, well put, Tom. I mean, what I would say in answer to sort of James's question there is, if you've got to that point where you've decided or you've realised you need a ... insert apprentice role, you've probably left it too late, and you're probably not going to get the right fit for your business, because you're going cap in hand to the training provider, whichever one that is, to be then given. It should have started. And most schools offer a work experience opportunity. And if you're not recruiting, if you're not in as a business, a local business, in the local school, how do you expect to get pick of the talent? If you're not first in the queue, you're not going to get the best, are you? And if you're not selling your business, and if you're not selling what it is like to work in your establishment as a great opportunity, then you're already down the queue. You're already not selecting potentially the ideal candidate. And I'll go back. It feels funny even for me talking about a garage having a culture, because it seems that they're words that didn't go together even 5-6 years ago. But now I think young people are far more aware, and if you, I'll give you some examples of a recent apprenticeship that sadly came to an end before the conclusion within my business, and the term used by his mother to me was modern slavery, and it really made me think about how and where and what, as a business, our culture was. What was we offering this young person? And often, and Tom's already spoken about it. He said wages weren't the most important thing, but they were quite high up. And if you're going to be an apprentice, the sort of, if you're a cynical business, you're probably thinking, well, what's the return on investment? What will he fetch me in year one? Or will he cost me, or she? Will they ever, pay their way? And should I only put their wages up when that happens? Is it almost introducing performance-related pay to an apprentice? It goes back to the sort of the conversations we're having earlier about what is expected of them. What do you expect? What's your business culture? Are you willing to give, or are you only willing to receive? And they're all things that you should be considering at the point of recruitment, no matter who you're recruiting, whether that be an apprentice or any other member of staff. And I don't think an apprentice should be treated any different. And one of the things that we've done off the back of the conversation we had with that parent, because the father didn't see it in the same way as at all, because he was a tradesman, and he came through the similar route and felt that in the first year the apprentice should receive less money to prove that they're committed and dedicated, and it's costing the business time. But I've actually reverse my view based on it. And when we've recently looked to recruit an apprentice, we've spoken to the apprentice, not just about the money, but we've also said, if you're interested in working in a garage, surely you're going to be interested in driving a car as soon as you're 17. And of course, the young individual is like, well, of course I am. I'm interested in cars. Okay, we'll help you with your driving lessons. We'll help you with your insurance. We'll help you find your first car. It'll be a fixer-upper. You will do that as part of a project within work. We'll help you. You will have a fuel card to get back and forth to work. Now, they're not wages as such. They're benefits that are, if you like, linked to the development of the individual that you can't really put a price on. It builds loyalty. It comes two ways. Is that the culture that is going to attract a committed young individual, or is it just money? Because Tom said already, it's not the highest priority. It's something else. And if you're going to build culture, and then what I never want another parent coming in and saying an apprentice is a modern slave. I don't want them to think that we didn't think they were worth anything. And I think if you can think like that as a business and you open your offer, not just financially, but into everything else you're going to provide, I think you will start to attract better people into the trade.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. It's what springs to mind there is whether the relationship between the apprentice and the host business is a give-take, is a give-give, is a take-take. Where is that contribution between a relationship? Where does that exist? How is that framed? And I think that could well dictate the success or otherwise of that relationship going forward, which has to be probably made clear at the outset that it's a win-win for both parties. And I don't think necessarily that some garages, when they embark upon the recruitment process, they're looking for somebody to give to their business. They're not necessarily looking to give to the apprentice that development route and building their skills, knowledge and understanding. So it's a really good point, Andy, yeah. So with regards to that, one of the questions that I'd got that sprung to my mind, in a garage business, then, do they have necessarily, or how could we give guidance to that employer about training, coaching, and mentorship? Because these are all skills that maybe aren't key to the garage's normal day-to-day function. They're a sort of subset of human resources or development training. Would it be well placed for a garage to undertake some learning and development about how to succeed with an apprentice? So they need pre-apprenticeship training or awareness, at least, to make sure that the relationship of mentoring and coaching would work. What do you think?
It's a challenge, that one, James, isn't it? Because it's, we're now saying, it's a good thing to take on an apprentice and the extra work that's involved in doing that. But before you do extra work, then we also want you to do some training and, take some time off your work and things like that. So perhaps we come back to, and I know this is one of your favourite sayings, James, isn't it, really, is that, and Andy as well, I'm sure, but always try to see training as an investment and not a cost. So some training into how to mentor and how to look after an apprentice is actually going to pay you back big time further down the line, because you'll look after your apprentice properly. They'll develop the skills that you want them to develop. They'll develop the attitudes that you want them to develop. But hopefully, not everything works perfectly, does it? But hopefully it all works out. You reward them in the ways that Andy was suggesting, which is a wonderful idea. And I think that is a way forward, but I think it's a hard sell. I don't fully understand how all the apprenticeship relationships work, but, when you're linked with a college or a training centre, you do receive visits from people, who come along and say, how is it all going and all of that sort of thing. Well, maybe those visits could turn into mini training sessions rather than, checking that there's enough sort of, toilet roll hanging up, and things like that, so to turn that into some kind of mentoring and training, dare I say, for the mentors and trainers, really, to follow it through in that way. So that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of that before, but it's a good point.
Yeah, that's it. We've got to be careful about overburdening and making it too burdensome on the garage. But I was really just thinking about what Andy said there, and the garage are investing a lot of time and effort into that person, and to be highly effective whilst doing it, it's obviously going to result in a positive result for all parties. So that's one of the things. Particularly, we've got an apprentice here, and I thought one of the advantages I've got being in this, having this expertise in coaching and mentoring, made that process probably quite good. And it struck me as thinking, I know other people that have got apprentices that struggle a little bit with how to coach them, and also maybe some planning about the activities that they're doing. How are they fully employed or engaged? How does that work in parallel to the training they're receiving formally at the college? And really having that as a program of training inside the business that is supported by training outside of the business. And I know some colleges, like you say, Tom, do provide some liaison to facilitate that, because it's often, when we think about the early stages, there's a tripartite agreement between the apprentice, the employer, and the college. And I wonder sometimes, with my recent experience of a non-motor trade related, this is a marketing apprentice, Olivia, that we've got here, that relationship didn't work that well, if I'm being completely honest. And had that been my first ever impression of an apprentice, I think that process and that came down to communication, was a big threat to the success of the overall process. And I suppose we're suffering a little bit with COVID. We've got to say there weren't that visitation sort of dropped off a little bit, but I wonder, do the colleges and training providers really focus on that again as a key metric, a key measure, and a key influencer? So that would be one of my own personal advice things. How could we improve it? That would be one of the things. Really make sure that relationship is great, and mentoring the mentors.
I think it's worth rewinding a little bit from here as well, because we mentioned earlier on, or Andy started the conversation about, if you're not already linked with your local schools, getting people on work experience and different things like that, then, you are going to miss out on the best people, if you like. But I was just thinking that aspect through a little bit further, and how in this entire process, there's two ways of looking at it, really, is that the employer can choose to drive the process from day one, can go and find their apprentice and, can then say, right, well, I'm now going to find a suitable college, training centre or whatever that will help me with that apprentice. The other way, which is the way that my gut feeling and some experience tells me happens, is that the colleges tend to recruit some people and then knock on the door of of the employers, and say, can you take this person on? And really, that tends to be how it's happened for quite a while, but that's completely upside down and back to front, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a great point, Tom. How do you know this person is suitable for your business from that external being pushed, as somebody pushed on you? It's likely to be the person who lives closest. Yeah,
and interesting, and if you take that the other way, so I would say then, if you looked at the apprentice coming from a college because they found an apprentice, what makes the college that's local to you right for your training needs also? And a lot of this is geographically based. I have an apprentice need. My local college is 10 miles, 2 miles down the road. That's does that fit culturally? Have we got shared objectives? Do they meet? I think we suffer historically from your local college. That's the phrase that sits around your local college. That's the only option you've got. And maybe with the advent of digitalization, transport aside, selecting your training provider and selecting your apprentice, we maybe need to think slightly laterally about that process, that geography shouldn't be the key selection criteria.
I mean, I base my selection of training provider largely on the assessor that comes to the garage. And before we started with apprentices, we invited, shall we say, the external assessors to come and visit us and have a chat with them and find out how they perceive their role. Now, granted, I have a little bit of inside knowledge, having worked in a college for a number of years as a lecturer, looking after apprentices as well, but not externally assessing them, but having them visit me. So I had an idea of what the journey looked like. The colleges we chose and a training provider we chose, in each case was based on the input from the external assessor as our training provider, because ultimately that's the person that you need to have the contact with, as he is the face of the organization, or she is the face of the organization, should I say. Because if you have a problem, either way, whether that be the apprentice has a problem with the workplace or the workplace has a problem with the apprentice, they're the mediator, they're the go-between, they're the first stop. And if that person, you can maybe gauge it on your own values and beliefs. But for me, that person has to be invested in the outcomes of both parties. And if you're having an honest conversation with them about the individual and their suitability, they get to know you, you get to know them, and they're going to send only to you for the trial periods, as opposed to interviews, as Tom quite rightly said, are only going to be people who are suitable for your business. And it's not going to be based on geography. It's going to be based on individual criteria that you've probably set out, and that is, I think, critical. But if you don't have that relationship with that external assessor and you're out looking for an apprentice, my first piece of advice is find out who that individual is, get them in, get the kettle on, get the biscuits out, sit down, have a cup of tea, start explaining what you're about, what you would like, and what's available.
Okay, guys, another question that sprung to mind is what guidance should we give to employers regarding their attitude to mistakes the apprentice might make and the value of mistakes in the learning process?
I'll jump in first on that one, shall I? I'm sure Andy's got some good suggestions as well. But I think the first thing I'd like to say about mistakes is I've made a few. Is it Frank Sinatra or something? Mistakes. I've made a few. I've made a few mistakes since I stopped being an apprentice. I mean, it's not something that goes away. The drilling a hole through a Motronic engine management unit once is one that springs to my mind. I'll cover the details of how I managed to get out of that another time. But it happens. Mistakes happen. And I learned, quite late in my career that wasn't a very good thing to do. And I got out of it, and I learned the ways of getting out of it. And I learned a lot from it and things like that. And it's exactly the same with an apprentice. They are going to make mistakes. They are going to damage things, and that's part of what we've got to expect. And on the subject of expectations, I think sometimes employers have the very wrong idea about what an apprentice will be able to do very early on in their career. Again, if I'm being honest about myself, in the very early stages of my career, working as an apprentice, I mean, I was in the army where I did my training, but it was still, effectively an apprenticeship. I was useless, really. I didn't know. I got things wrong and so on, but the environment allowed me to do that, and I learned from it and improved from it. So I think, that would be my general feeling about errors, is that they are going to happen. Prepare for them, budget for them, if you like, and help the apprentice and yourself learn from them. That's got to be the key message, really.
So from my point of view, it's got to be an environment where it's safe to make mistakes, where everyone recognizes that mistakes will happen, but mistakes should also be mitigated in as much as if the apprentice is making the kind of catastrophic error that we sometimes hear about, how was he allowed, or they were allowed, to get to that point without, if they're being supervised correctly for the stage of their training they're at, then they shouldn't be able to make much more than basic errors, simple, And I'll, much like Tom, I'll confess, and I'll do one that I did recently. I have a horrible habit of leaving vehicles in gear. You can guess what happened next when the apprentice started the van, and we did a new roller shutter door. Okay, there was a lot of learning there for everyone involved, not not least me. Why am I leaving the vehicle? It's just a really bad habit I have. Why am I leaving vehicles again? Why then do I ask someone to turn the key on a vehicle where you know how easy it is in the garage just to lean in through the open window and turn the key? Luckily, no one was injured, just a roller shutter door. But in that environment, the debrief, which has to happen hot, it has to happen there and then it has to be a little bit more formal from there on in, is everyone has to take responsibility. It isn't the apprentice's fault when something goes wrong. In the majority of cases, it's a failure of supervision. But it's how you manage that as an organization, and how do you take that forward? I'm pretty sure now that individual will always check whether the vehicle is in gear, or will probably, as the procedure we adopted, get in the vehicle and dip the clutch, because majority of vehicles nowadays you do need to do brake or clutch to get them to crank. But if you then learn from it, and let's be fair, our greatest learning is from our mistakes. We learn from other things, but we learn best from our mistakes. But the best way to learn is from other people's mistakes. And take that from me, you must not leave an apprentice out of his depth, in my opinion, unsupervised, because you're asking for trouble. And then if it does happen, you've got to ask the question of yourself before you apportion blame on the individual. And this doesn't really matter whether it's an apprentice or any other member of staff. Who is truly to blame? And if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So make sure you mitigate against mistakes happening in the first place. But have a safe environment, especially if you do have an apprentice, where mistakes can happen, where you expect mistakes to happen, but you're mitigating those mistakes with correct supervision, and accept they're part of the process. And then, I don't know whose famous quote it is, but the man who made no mistakes made nothing. And it's never truer.
No, very good points. It's about the learning journey, and maybe that again comes partly down to culture, doesn't it, Andy? Where the culture of the business is to expect those mistakes, but learn from them. And yeah, that's a big part of it, and not pillory. I guess the delicate part of the apprentice being on show in the workplace is how these mistakes handle within the crew. So it's often when as Tom made that example, when he made that faux pas, some of the mistakes I know when I worked in a garage that I made almost became the stuff of legend, that whenever a mistake came about, we'd drag the old mistake that James made at that, and it would be regurgitated at the tea break time, and then you were made to feel, I'm not a delicate shrinking flower, so I could laugh it off. But I can see in sometimes that the if you in inverted commas banter or the spirit or culture of the workplace could be seen as being not supportive in that way, without being sort of all girly about it. But what advice could we give to garages or co-colleagues then about managing the apprentice in their learning mode? And I think sometimes it often springs to mind when I follow a learner driver. We live out in the sticks, and I follow a learner driver up the lane. Maybe I'm in a bit of a rush. It's having the concept to go, I was that soldier at one time, and I was unsure, and I need to pull back, and I need to chill out. What advice can we give to garage folk, the employers, and also other techs, to ensure that they are more supportive?
I think it comes down to your health and safety policy, that it has to be a safe place to work. And that when I say a safe place to work, I mean that physically and psychologically. One person's banter is another person's bullying, and you must understand and have clear guidelines. And if someone looks upset, they probably are, and absolutely back off and make sure everyone. And if you have the right culture in your business, if your business is a place where mistakes happen. So, and I'll just use my workplace as an example. We pick a job every month that didn't go as well as we expected, and we dissect it. And the key actors within that process are held accountable. But it's not personal. And what we're trying to do is improve the process. And we do one every month. If the apprentice starts in that building, in that room, when they had nothing to do with what went wrong, they know that everyone makes mistakes. It's not accepted. What we do is we learn, and that is if that's the culture within the business. When he makes it or they make a mistake, what that apprentice can expect is, yes, learning, for the mistake to be identified, but once it's done and dusted, buried. Let's move on, unless it happens again and again, and then it becomes a problem. Because if we're making the same mistakes over and over, there's something wrong in the learning or the culture or the environment. And it's got to be, as I say, it's got to be a safe place to work, as I said, physically and psychologically, in my opinion.
I think I couldn't agree more with Andy. And I mean, for goodness sake, it's 2023, isn't it? It's not, the banter in the workshops and things like that. We old blokes, me in particular, have been through the times when it was okay to be horrible to everybody, and it wasn't ever really okay, was it? I mean, we damaged people, and people were damaged. I mean, for goodness sake, it's time we moved out of all of that crap, to be honest, and lifted the sort of quality of everything that we do, and that includes interpersonal relationships. And it's part of the general, we use the word culture quite a lot, haven't we? And I use the word ethics of a business and things like that. I mean, grow up, come on. It's time we left all that nonsense behind, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the process there of the review, Andy, I love that, where everyone's together, the responsible and those not responsible. And I think the key is, as you said, is washing up in his learning from the mistake, moving on, and then, a new day, a new process. But also very interesting there that, generally it will be a failure in process if the technician or the apprentice is being asked to do stuff. Where do garages, what tips can we give to garages where they have an apprentice about, there's a fine line, isn't there, between, the inner and the outer edge of the comfort zone where they're happy to be stretched. But if they're operating on their wrong side, you're erring towards a mistake. What tools or tips can we give to garages, or how should that work to ensure that the apprentice is being stretched but not too far?
So it comes back to, once again, and we're using the term a lot, but culture. If you're giving somebody a task and they're afraid to ask you questions about that task, then you're likely to end up in that situation where you go beyond the inner and the outer of that zone. Because if you're getting asked too many questions, you're probably stretching too far. As long as those questions are free to be asked, if the apprentice is asking a few questions, then they're probably, or not asking any, they're probably not being stretched enough. And I think that is the key identifier. And it comes back to a comment you made earlier on about coaching and mentoring and training for that. Is you'll either gain that by experience or by having some training yourself. And it may be that if the apprentice is failing in your eyes, once again, put the mirror on yourself. Who is really failing? And is the task you're giving the apprentice too difficult, or is they not being mentored, or they feel they can't ask the question when they are struggling, when they don't know what to do, therefore they do what they think rather than what they should, which was ask a question and do it correctly.
I think it takes us almost, full circle back to the beginning when we started talking about understanding and getting the right person for the right role in the first place. If we've taken time earlier on, then it becomes less of a problem down the line, about boundaries and things like that. So it's definitely fundamental to get to know the right person early on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. And that, again, cultural fit of there's never the wrong question. There's only no questions, and that is wrong. And I think probably that's a good driving, statement. If they're not asking questions, there's something wrong. Yeah. And time for review. But I think the review process, probably having that open and honest position, is going to hopefully keep them stretched but not too far. And that, I think, this is a key for me in that relationship: stretched but not too far. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, chaps, this has been really, really beneficial. I'd like to change gears a little bit now and maybe think about couple of questions to end upon. It's been a really useful chat and discussion, but one of the key questions often, and the first time I heard it, it sort of stopped me in my tracks. It was one of those, Andy and I have done that System 1, System 2. It was a System 2 question. And as I was strolling along, I stopped because I didn't really have an answer. So it's about, would you recommend this trade to your son, daughter, nephew or niece? And what are the key selling points? So, Tom, if I can ask you first.
Unequivocal. I can't even say that word. Cut. Right, start again. Yes, I definitely would. And I'd be happy to recommend it because I've had a really good time in my career. But I would also take a part in helping them understand what the career paths were and what the options were and things like that. So I think that would be an important aspect to it. So I'd be more than happy to do that and happy to support them in the process. And there was another part to your question, James, which I missed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what would the key selling points be then, right, Tom, if you were the cultural attaché for the motor trade?
Well, then in that case, I'll almost repeat myself a little bit, but to sell the fact that there are many more different and varied options within our trade than it would first appear. It always appears until you've, explained to somebody that it's a dead-end job, there's nowhere to go. There are all sorts of places that you can move into. I mean, I've met some people recently who, started as an apprentice and did their apprenticeship, worked for a few years in a garage, but they've moved into working with a parts supplier, for example, running training and, technical demonstrations and making, learning material with them and different things like that. There's a whole range of jobs. And that's one, right off at the side that you'd never even think of normally. So that would be my thing, is that there really is something in it for everybody once you've realised the different opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, great stuff. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, I agree with Tom wholeheartedly. I'm really passionate about the industry, and what I would say what we need is more high level, high caliber individuals joining, and that's what I'm passionate about in terms of the automotive industry. And how would I sell it? We're about to go through possibly the most radical change since the car was invented, probably since the wheel was invented in terms of propulsion systems. The future is uncertain for the vehicle. Will we still be using cars? Will personal mobility look like it does now in 20 years? In the lifetime, in the working lifetime, half the working lifetime of an apprentice, they could see so much change. This is the second fastest moving industry to the aerospace industry. We need highly qualified, high quality, high caliber individuals in it. And it is an exciting place to be.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, I agree. It's we've seen huge changes up until now, but I think you're right. We're in a new phase of the unknown, the known unknown screeching up on the outside. So it is an exciting time. It really is. Yeah, thanks for that, guys. Really insightful. I suppose the other thing I was thinking about, the sort of crux of the matters, we talked about apprenticeships. One of the questions often garages are faced with when maybe they haven't planned or they've had that emergency where the linchpin guy is left. They're often faced with the question is poaching a qualified tech from another workshop more beneficial to their business, maybe if they were thinking about bottom line and maybe hassle factor, than recruiting and training an apprentice? What could we say to a garage who maybe are using the poaching technique to sustain their business and they think grow it, versus the longer term goals of apprenticeship, maybe multiple apprenticeship, as Andy said?
Well, my simple answer to that is, if you want to steal talent, you must be willing to have your talent stolen. If you want to create talent, create an environment where nobody can take them.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't sit well with me, that you would steal somebody from down the road. But, on the other hand, if that's your methodology, then okay, good luck to you. But I would also say that what you're doing, right back to what we were talking about earlier, the culture has been our favourite word today, and the ethics and things like that. You're taking somebody you don't really know. They might be a good tech, or they might be a good paint sprayer or something. They might be very good at that little bit of the job. But are they really going to fit into your business? If you do the training yourself, get the right person in the first place, and then you mold them and they mold you, and they fit into your business. So I don't think as a long-term strategy it's a good idea at all, and it just doesn't sit well with me, I'm afraid, really. The number of people I see saying there aren't any techs out there, how are we going to get a new tech? I say, well, have you taken an apprentice on? No. Well, there you go then. It's important. Do it.
It's more important to be part of the solution than part of the problem, Tom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There is that angle to the longer term aspects. I think if you're tactically managing your business and you have a gap, hang on, there is that question that comes up, did you not see the frailty of that position? Emergencies happen and, things do go on, but maybe a business that's suffering from a staffing crisis that they have to poach, maybe there's a growth opportunity, but if there's a growth opportunity, that should be planned. And maybe if it was planned, there's apprenticeship techniques in place. So, yeah, it's difficult. It's often seen. A lot of people you will see posting, "I need a tech. I've got an open position." I think you're right, Tom. I think that's a critical question to. Well, how is your apprenticeship program delivering technicians into your business?
Well, there is a slight caveat to that. Often apprentices, for whatever reason, find themselves without a placement, and there is an opportunity. Once again, go back to what we've been saying all along, making sure you've got the right person in the right seat. It is the right fit for your business. But someone who, through no fault of their own, for whatever reason, might be halfway through their apprenticeship, could be going into the level 3 stage, or the placement they're at isn't willing to take them to level 3, and that apprentice has aspirations. At that point, taking that apprentice on and allowing them to continue on their journey, I think is fair and relevant. One that has for whatever reason found himself without, or theirself without a placement, is a valid reason, because you're enabling someone to continue their journey within the profession that we all love and enjoy, hopefully. So there are caveats to that, but I would agree with what James just said. If you as a business recognize the opportunities for growth, or you realize you've got linchpins within your business, you should already have apprentices in place, and they are the ideal people to take on in your business, to drive your business. And what I will say with what I've done in my business recently, and I'm not saying that we have all the right answers, because I'm sure I don't, that we've started taking people on with a view to giving them some skin in the game, if you like, in as much as the outcomes of the business are dependent on them. We all agree that. Therefore, we remunerate them within the outcomes of the business. And if you're thinking about what you're going to do as the business owner when it comes to an end, well, one of those apprentices could be the person who takes your business on. So you could almost start at the beginning and say, right, you will have a share scheme. And is there any better way of retaining talent than them having some interest in the actual business and the outcomes of that business? It's something to think about.
I mean, linked with that, Andy, I think is the overall subject of retaining staff, isn't it? You know, so I can never remember the Richard Branson quote. Something along the line is train them so well that they don't want to leave, or something like that. You know, it's, in other words, look after the people. You might remember it better, but there are lots of ways of keeping people invested in the business. I mean, shares is one option, but I mean, I've come across a company local to me in the past, and what they did was, when an apprentice first started, they paid each month something into like a pension or an endowment scheme or something, relatively small amount of money on the grand scheme of things, and that was done in, I don't know the legalities of it, but broadly speaking, that as long as the apprentice stayed there for 2 years after they'd finished their apprenticeship or something, that pot of money or that pot of investment was theirs. And it just felt to me, you know, quite a crude method in a way, because it should be coupled in with looking after them properly and everything else like that, but at least a positive way of trying to keep people. So, you know, there are different ways, and think laterally about it, and get people, as you say, invested into your business, because that's what you really want, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes back to the old saying that your business is your people. There is no business without the people. And often people think of garage X or garage Y as being the bricks and the mortar and the ramps and the building and the floor. And it's actually the people that inhabit within, and empty sheds with no people equals no business. Great stuff. No, really insightful. Thanks for that, chaps. I've got a final question. So just to round up with, if you had a magic wand and you could have one action that garages or colleges could waive to make the apprenticeship adoption or execution better, what would your wish with that wand be?
I think mine's fairly obvious. I've kind of said it all the way through, and that is engage with your local providers. With that, from the people, in terms of your community, the training providers, the colleges, the schools, the assessors. Make sure your business is an open door to those, and that you know who those individuals are. You know the key people you need to speak to, so that your business is the first one that anyone thinks of, because you're the person who supports the community, and that can be really simple stuff, sponsoring the local, whatever it is where your talent hangs out. Doing that within your community.
Yeah, I agree, Andy. And I was going to say a broadly similar thing, and it's words I've said earlier on about, as the employer, you should be the one that's driving this process. You should be doing all the things that Andy just said there, but you're the one who's in charge of it. And I just kind of add on to the top of that with my magic wand. So I've waved it down and got that, and waving it back up and get something else or something. But it's this idea of, I've just written it down in my notes, make time for your apprentice. It's often, the idea of, we've got all this extra work to do. Let's get an apprentice on and they can do that sort of work. No, you're missing the point. You're going down the wrong road if you're doing that sort of thing. Make time for your apprentice so that you can train them, get to know them, help them, discipline them when it needs doing, that sort of thing. But you have to have time in your own work process to be able to do that. So that's one of my magic wands.
Oh, that's brilliant. Very, very insightful. That's superb. Thank you very much. Gents, that's where we wanted to be. So thank you very, very much, Tom, for your insight. And Andy, as always, it's been a brilliant pleasure. And I'm sure you'll agree the conversation we've had there hopefully gives garages, maybe apprentices, maybe parents of apprentices and colleges some things to think about to expand their understanding and maybe direction they might want to go with regards to apprentices. So I'm truly thankful for your contribution there, guys. Thanks ever so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you, James.